Hello and welcome to Knife Delights. This is another 2 for Tuesday special. This is about my third or fourth take on this video because I just can't seem to get it right. What I hope to accomplish in this video is to try to explain some of the evolution of buck slip joint knives. It gets very confusing. Just so you know, buck knives was always known for their fixed blade hunting knives for years, up until the early 60s, and then they came out with the 110 folding hunter, which was, well, to put it mildly, a smashing success. Then Buck decided that they would get into the slip joint business, but they did not have the means or the know-how on manufacturing slip joint knives. So initially, a lot of the early Buck slip joints were made by Schrade. They had a contract with Schrade to make them. After 2 or 3 years, they became dissatisfied with Schrade's quality, and they switched the contract to Camillus. And Camillus made a lot of the buck knives for many years. In 1984, Buck finally acquired the equipment and the know-how, the expertise, if you will, to start manufacturing some of their own slip joints. So in 1984, Buck started making the 301, the 303, the 305, and the 309 in-house. What confuses all of this, and why I'm having a hard time explaining all of this, is for each model, the rules don't apply all the way through. And this Buck Lancer is a very good example. Now, the Lancer was introduced in 1969, and the bottom one here is the Camillus made model. The list price for this knife was $7 in 1969. There are no records, those that have researched this, there are no records that Schrade ever had a contract to make the Lancer. So the Lancer was either made by Camillus, or starting in 1984, it started being manufactured by Buck themselves. Now, the Buck Lancer last appeared in the 2017 catalog. The MSRP for this knife was $42. The 375 Deuce appeared in the 2018 catalog, and of course the Deuce is a Chinese-made version, if you will, of the Lancer. So as I zoom out here just a little bit, I'll just show you, there's the Lancer. And it's plain wood grain, and you can find it in your big box stores. I guess Buck just found that the Lancer was no longer profitable, but they still wanted to offer a model, and they've done that with several of their slip joint models, having them manufactured overseas. So how can one tell that whether it was a Camillus-made buck, a Buck-made buck, or a Schrade-made buck? Well, I don't have an example. Again, Schrade never did make the Lancer. However, in some of the other models of their slip joints, one thing Schrade did is they pinned the covers. Now here's a modern old-timer, but as you can see, the covers are actually pinned on there. So on the old Buck slip joints, if you find one where the covers are actually pinned on, that's an indication that it was one of the very early models and was made by Schrade. I guess I thought that one of the best ways to teach myself and try to get it straight in my mind was to buy another version of the Lancer, and I'll try to get some more versions of either this Lancer or maybe even the 301 Stockmans, try to get some of them that were made throughout the years so I could track the changes to them. Now, the Lancer was described as a premium penknife, and it has an overall length of 2 5/8 inches. So this buck on top here was a Buck-made Lancer, and it was made in 1988 according to the date stamp on it. So knowing that Buck started manufacturing it on their own in 1984, and that Schrade never made the Lancer, it looks like this bottom one, this Camillus made Lancer, was made somewhere between 1969 and 1984, since there is no date stamp or no date symbol on it. Okay, as we zoom in here again, you can immediately see one or two differences. If you look at the Buck logo on the top one, the Buck made one, and then the Camillus made one, the one on the bottom has the traditional Buck logo there. That's the hammer hitting a fixed blade and cutting a bolt. That was their initial marketing scheme there, to say, hey, look how tough Buck knives are. You can cut a bolt with them. Sometime in the mid 80s, they switched over to just this logo here that says Buck on it. That only lasted maybe 3 or 4 years, and then they returned back to using the traditional logo. You can also see, just laying here, that there is a difference in the blade. You can see the swedge there on the Camillus made versus almost a non-existent swedge. There's a tiny one there on the Buck made. And then I'm going to go ahead and open up the blades here, and we'll take a look at the blades themselves. Okay, a close look at the blades. Again, you can see the difference in the swedge. The swedge is only on one side, but this long nail nick there, that's the telltale sign that it was Camillus made. From what I can see on any Camillus made Buck slip joint, if it has the long nail pull, it's going to be made by Camillus. Except that, again, on different models, very early ones, I don't know what the frayed nail pull looked like. I'm going to have to find one of these models, maybe in a Stockman or the one of the Stockmans that was made by Schrade, so I can check the difference in their blades and nail pulls too. But between the Camillus and the Buck made, you can see the difference. Buck always used the little half moon nail nick there. You can see there is a difference in the Tang stamps, and I'll change this around here real quick. That kind of gives you a good shot of the Tang stamps. The Camillus made one seems to be a heavier stamp in it, and there is no date symbol on it. Buck started using their date symbols in 1986, I believe it was. Okay, now we can take a look at the rest of the knife here. Of course, the Lancer has both the clip point and a coping blade to it. And although these coping blades, especially this one, has been used, it's hard to get an exact comparison, but it looks like the coping blade is the same on both of these knives, from what I can see. Look at them there. They look to be the same blade. I think one of the biggest differences between these two knives is when you turn it over and you look at the back side, and you can see the brass liners on the Buck made. I'm sorry, this is the Camillus made. And then we look at the ones on the Buck made, and we'll get them oriented the same here, and we'll do a comparison. And you can see how much thicker and more heavy duty the brass liners are on the Buck made versus the Camillus made. Which thicker liners means the knife is actually wider or thicker. So Buck, well, it looks like they reinforced it and made it a more sturdier knife. Well, I certainly hope you've enjoyed this comparison between the two different Buck models. Again, this is my quest for this year, trying to come to grips on the confusing history of the Buck slip joints. I find it to be very fascinating, and I hope to learn more. I think I'm finally getting it kind of straight in my head. I'm on the lookout for a very early Buck slip joint, probably like a 301 or a 303, that was made by Schrade, so I can compare that too. So until next time, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I wish you a very delightful day.